Newsfirst, face to face with Shanakyan Benedict.
National reconciliation is something that we as Sri Lankans have been looking at since the day of our independence. But since the day of our independence, we haven't been able to achieve it. In fact, as a result of not achieving it in time, we had to suffer a 30-year-long war. There was the recent carnage, of course, of the Easter Sunday attacks. And if we do not resolve the national reconciliation issue here in Sri Lanka, one can only imagine what the future holds for Sri Lanka in a context where the country is going through one of the worst economic crises the world has ever seen. Good evening and welcome. This is Face to Face. Joining us to discuss these matters and much more taking place in the political scene here in Sri Lanka is TNA parliamentarian Shanakyan Rasamanickam. A very good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening to you. Thank you.
Shanakyan, now you've been advocating for national reconciliation, for peace among all communities, equal rights for all communities for quite a long time now. In fact, your party has been advocating for the same for an even longer time period. But there seems to be no progress being made. Why is that?
Well, very good evening to all the viewers as well. It's a very good question that you asked, and I would like to start by saying that there was an armed conflict in this country for 30 years, and the armed conflict came to an end in 2009. But that doesn't mean that the ethnic conflict has been resolved. So the ethnic conflict arose after the British gave the country independence. That's when the issue actually started, and 75 years later we are facing the same issues to date. Now I took my grandfather was a member of parliament in the late 60s and late 60s and the late 50s, and I was reading through one of his speeches of the Hansard, and I was thinking to myself, the matters that he had raised in the 60s and the 50s are very similar to the matters that I raise now in parliament concerning Batiklo. So national unity and reconciliation is of utmost importance and should be a priority right now, taking into consideration that the country's economy has come into these dire straits because of that. Not just because of a 30-year-old war and the the finances that went towards it, but the reason why this country has not developed or the country has not reached its true potential is because there is no equality in this country.
And we're too busy fighting amongst each other.
Well, see, the thing is, now a lot of people, I saw Honorable Vijaydas Rajapaksa speak in Parliament earlier this morning saying that as a cabinet minister he has done so much more for the Tamil community than the Tamil politicians have done. Now that statement in itself shows how less educated the Minister of Justice is on our issues and what our position is, because the Tamil political party, my party for an instance, we have not been part of any government in the last 75 years, barring one instance where I think there was a Senate member from our party in the 60s. That too was for a few months. And there were a few crossovers, I believe. Well, crossovers are not, the crossovers are not part of our party, after they cross over. So, in that sense, we have never really had any power to resolve any of our people's issues, which is precisely why the whole question about devolution and sharing power is still very much an issue that is, that people in the North and the East vote for. He said that only about 2% of the people in the North and the East have the issues that the politicians raise. But then why haven't the people rejected our party then? Our party's election manifesto, I think, apart from a few things along the lines of the economy and economic livelihood and anything to do with finance, hasn't really changed much in terms of what sort of a solution that we are trying to achieve.
But Shanakyan, is the position of your party that the issues of the minority communities, in this case specifically the Tamil communities, can only be resolved if the TNA comes into power or is aligned with the government or is given, positions of power to work in? Is that your party's position?
No.
That's the only way that you can resolve these?
No, I think first of all, we don't consider ourselves a minority per se. We are a people, so we are entitled to all
representation.
We are entitled to all the rights that a people the definition of a people. So we are a numerical minority in terms of numbers. So therefore, we are not asking for a separate country. We are asking for equal power to be devolved. Now, for an example, just to break it down to a common man, if there's some law legislation that is brought into parliament that is favorable for the Tamils but not so much unfavorable for any other community, that law would only be able to be passed within parliament that is concerning those areas. Now let's break it down even further. Let's say in the northern and the eastern province to do with cattle, for cattle farming, that there is a new law, right? That law
to give them the grasslands to graze.
Something along the lines that will only impact that area. We still have to come to a parliament, the Parliament of Sri Lanka, where the Tamil speaking MPs are significantly small number. So the majority of the parliamentarians are from the majority community, who would then need to agree for us to resolve an issue of very small issues. These are not issues that are related to defense or immigration or even, let's say, borrowing from a foreign country. These are day-to-day issues that we face, issues that people face day to day that can happen with change of legislation. So which is why if power is devolved, that people can decide what's best for them within their provinces or within their whichever unit that they are from. So our position is that why should the Tamil people not have that ability to decide what's best for us? Not the only issues that people face. There are other issues that people face which need to be resolved, and that can only be resolved if people from those areas have the power to decide what's best for them.
But Shanakyan, now there have been certain measures that the TNA, the ITAC, now you yourself said that you took Hansard from the late 60s, I believe, and read it, and the issues are still the same. Just as much as the issues that are being faced by various communities in Sri Lanka are still the same, the solutions that are proposed by the politicians, by the leaders who represent us, are also the same. So, speaking specifically on the issue of national reconciliation, there are things that your party has tried, the ITAC, the TNA, there are things that the United National Party, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party have tried, but all of those have failed. What is your party, or what is anyone in the leadership of Sri Lanka right now doing that is different from what has already been done?
Well, what needs to be different is that the government should be true to its reconciliation efforts, which is the only thing that they haven't done in the past. Every ideology, that's the only thing that we can change. It's not like where we have been in power and we have not been wanting to reach agreement or reach consensus. Every single government. Now, Ranil Wickremesinghe last year when he became president, he had a meeting the day after, or on the day that he was elected by parliamentarians as president, he had a meeting at the presidential secretariat. Many issues were raised. To date, none of those issues have been resolved.
I believe his undertaking was to resolve the national conflict before independence. That
was almost 8 months ago. So 10 months ago. Not that we had any trust in it, but just like how we have tried to resolve our issues by working with every successive leader of the country, we tried with Ranil Wickremesinghe as well. So our issues have been the same. Our issues are not resolved, and our people want those issues to be resolved. Therefore, we still have to negotiate on those issues. So, and successive leaders have promised to resolve them. We can go back to history and look at the Banda Chelva Pact or the Dudley Chelva Nagam Pact or any of these pacts, or even Mahinda Rajapaksa agreed to 13 plus. None of these have been actually come into existence. So how do you blame a party that has 10 members of parliament right now? How can we bring about change within the parliamentary system?
But Shanakyan, what I'm referring to is now all of these instances that you referred to, these failed attempts, these failed pacts, these failed deals, all of those deals and agreements were with political leaders. Has, for instance, the TNA or the ITAC for once at least attempted to have a conversation with the people, because at the end of the day, the leaders will come and go. They can give promises, they can break promises, but reaching out to the general public, that's the true way of finding a solution to this. So has your party ever considered that?
Well, that's a very valid point, and I think there's a language barrier also in communicating.
Clearly not with you.
Well, exactly.
I think you are one of the better speakers in all three languages in Parliament.
It's my first time in Parliament. But I mean, apart from myself, I think it's only Honorable Sumandiran who could converse in Sinhala within our party as well. I'm sure Mr. Sambandhan during his time was able to, but he's now not that active in the grassroots. So we have tried. We have worked with we have even tried to work with the Young Men's Buddhist Association to try and reach out. But the thing is, it's we can create awareness, all that can be done. But this is about the political will, and it has to come from a political leader. Like, this is a national question, this is a national issue, right? So even if you look at, let's say, countries like recently Australia had a referendum where they wanted to...
Rights for the Aboriginal people.
Not rights, it was more so...
More representation.
No, it was more so to say that the Aborigines were the original inhabitants of the country, and that that to acknowledge that and also some representation where any laws that are relating to them would get a discussion at least before it's passed, something like that. But the people who voted in support of the referendum and who voted against it both had people from the non-Aboriginal community who were either saying we should vote for this or we should not vote for this. So it should come from, so we need a leader who has a backbone within the majority community, who is brave enough to come out and say, look, this must be resolved, and not just say this must be resolved, take it to the people. So Ranil Wickremesinghe has said that this must be resolved, but what has he done to take it to the people? What has his his cabinet ministers, at least within his cabinet, they could have made some progress. But it is completely, I'm saying there is no political will on this matter, and just look at the examples. I mean, it's people get disheartened eventually. I mean, if as a young MP I had some sort of hope. I mean, my members of my party who have been MPs for like the last decade or more even have faced so many instances where they've met leaders of this country who have promised everything and not delivered anything. So when they go into a meeting, they're very skeptical. They go into the meeting with with very hesitant, thinking this is just another meeting where they're going to promise us things just to please India, just to please the West, just to please the international community, just to satisfy the Human Rights Council. But when I went in for these meetings, starting from Gotabaya, I would come out feeling that there is some hope. But it's only it only becomes even worse. Now, for an example, in the last few weeks, the Prevention of Terrorism Act has been used again, and nearly 10 people have been arrested in my district. And
this is after the government promised on a moratorium on the PTA.
Moratorium, and in fact, I'm moving an adjournment motion tomorrow, which I hope the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Public Secretary will respond to about this PTA in itself. Moratorium, at least you don't respect an obligation or a commitment that you've made to your local fellow members of parliament, at least to the European Union. One would think that they would not do the opposite of what they promised. Look at the pasture land issue. I've been tweeting every now and then. Cattle are being killed every day, and you're destroying the livelihood of poor innocent livestock farmers who don't depend on the government for anything. They look after their cattle and they sell the milk, and that's how they've been living. And now you have brought in people to settle them in pasture lands. Encroachers have come in large numbers, destroying the livelihood of innocent Tamil livestock farmers. So how are we to blame, right? How are we to blame when what we have done our absolute best? We have gone to finally, because we haven't been able to resolve this through dialogue, we have gone to court. There's a case, and the Mahavali officials are lying to the judiciary as well. I mean, they should be held for contempt of court if possible, but they're doing it in such a way where it's a time-buying exercise.
Well, of course, those are matters before the court, and sub judice we can't really discuss too much and go into detail.
No, I'm the petitioner, so that I can as a petitioner, I'm just saying what I have gone to court about. Yeah.
Shanakyan, now you said that the TNA was never in a position of power. What is the highest possible position of power that the TNA has ever been in?
Well, I think, if we were to think about it, I think just in the northern province, when C.V. Vigneswaran was a chief minister.
No, I think there was a point where the TNA was higher. Well, quite recently.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe it was during the time of President Maithripala Sirisena.
How so?
When the TNA was given, there was a joint, was that during? Yes. During the time of President Maithripala Sirisena, there was the joint opposition, and then the TNA was given the position of opposition leader. R. Sambandhan was given the position of opposition leader. So would you agree with me if I say that that is one of the highest positions of power that the TNA has held in Sri Lanka?
That is not a position of power, it's the opposition leader.
Opposition leader?
Opposition
leader for the entirety of Sri Lanka.
So that doesn't mean that we have any power to resolve issues. That doesn't mean that we are the ones with the power to...
I don't know, I understand, I understand.
What I'm saying is in terms of having power to do things, where you are in charge, where you... I mean, being the opposition leader, that was also, let me correct you, was not given. It was, he was...
Yes, definitely.
It wasn't.
All I'm saying is that was the highest position. I stand corrected, not given.
No,
he was appointed as the opposition leader since he was the leader of the largest opposition group in Parliament.
Correct.
So my question to you is now.
Even at that time, we were in the. I mean, so are you trying to say that Honorable Sajith Premadasa now has the power to change things?
No. That's not what I'm trying to get at.
Because when you say highest position of power, that is maybe in terms of
since the TNA has not had a higher position of power.
No, that's so. Well, okay. Let's not get too
technical about it. My real question.
Let me kind of tell you on why I say that the Northern Provincial Council was the highest amount of power that the TNA had, was because we were in a position of power to make changes, bring in legislation. But again, there were, the powers of the Provincial Council had been taken back by the central government over the last few decades. Most powers that were vested within the Provincial Council were taken back to the central government. So whatever powers that C.V. Vigneswaran had at the time, there is criticism that C.V. Vigneswaran didn't do enough, which I agree with, right? Which I do agree with, that not enough was done. But that is the highest amount of power that the Tamil politicians of this country have had in the last 75 years.
My question
and in the Eastern Province also, the TNA has never been in absolute power.
But Shanakyan, my question to you is now, when Honorable R. Sambandhan was the leader of the opposition, he wasn't just the leader of the opposition for the north, or for the east, or for the Tamil community alone. He was the opposition leader of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, the opposition leader for the entirety of Sri Lanka. And I might be wrong, but from what I saw, with what transpired in Parliament, there wasn't too much being spoken about issues being faced by all Sri Lankans as a whole at the time he was at the helm of the opposition leader. And the reason why I'm saying this is because somebody has to take a first step.
Well, you see, people say this all the time, but just remember when Ranil Wickremesinghe was, there was a coup and Ranil Wickremesinghe was kicked out of the Prime Minister's position. It was Mr. Sambandhan who went to court first. He was the first petitioner against that. And that was in the interest of the country's constitution and the country's democracy. It was in the interest of the entire country, not just in terms of North and the East. So, on most, if there were any, inefficiencies, obviously, that is something that need to be taken up with Mr. Sambandhan. But in my opinion, he has been a member of Parliament for the last few decades, and he has been, I think he has committed his entire life for the cause of the Tamil people to win their political rights. So I think, when even that can't be achieved, how would he have been able to really, and it was a 2/3 government as well.
What I'm wondering is, when it comes to this issue of national reconciliation, I mean, we can go back and forth about how they haven't done this, and these people haven't done this, and all of that. But the bottom line is that
if I one day become the opposition leader, I would do things differently. Let's keep it at that. Let's keep it at that.
Right. So, Shanakyan, speaking about moving forward, of course, we see a lot of members of parliament are well above their age of retirement, and of course this is not only an issue here in Sri Lanka but across many democracies in the world where youth representation is lacking. And at the end of the day, it is our future, the future of the youth, the future of the children of this country that is at stake, and that is being decided upon by people, of course, who haven't, well, let's just say, fared that well in bringing the country forward, at least in the case of Sri Lanka. So, as a person in his youth and as one of the younger parliamentarians, do you think that we need to go about this issue a little bit more creatively? Because doing the same thing over and over again would only reap the absolute same result.
Well, you see, about the age of parliamentarians getting elected to parliament, there is nothing that anybody can do about it, because they are being elected by the people. When people elect somebody, they know how old they are, right? But I have a firm belief that a lot of people don't believe in quotas, but I feel that a youth quota, if a youth quota can be introduced with the local council elections, we know there is a quota for female candidates. Likewise, I mean, for even for parliament, if we can have a youth and female quota, at least till we achieve a point where we have some sort of
organic growth,
or at least an acceptable level of representation. Now we have 50% women, and we only have 12 or 13 MPs in parliament, and out of the 12 or 13 who are MPs in parliament, if you look at them very closely, barring 2 or 3 of them, all of them have either who had a husband or a brother or a father who or was somebody or uncle who was in parliament before them. So it's a problem. So I think a youth quota is important, but I think more than all that, those are things that are for the future that we must really look at. But if you look at today's context, right now within today's context, if you look at we need to really bring about, Mrs. Sumandiran said this in parliament as well, there was an opportunity for historic change with Aragalaya, but that all of it was destroyed by President Ranil Wickremesinghe opting to take the premiership at the time. But again, I think the next year is going to be a significant year in the lives of all Sri Lankans, because like President Wickremesinghe has said, it's going to be a year of elections according to his predictions, presidential and parliament. So the decision that the decision that the majority community takes in this country will impact the lives of all Sri Lankans. Now, somebody said, in my district, when we were doing the go home Gota things, all over, somebody asked me why there was no real interest for go home Gota campaigns in Ampara, where Tamil people live. So in fact, I asked some of the our parties, grassroots level people, and said, you should probably, if you're opposed to him, you should do it. He said, so we never said we want Gota, so why should we ask him to go? I mean, we said go home Gota in 2019 by not voting for him. So Gotas, all of these Gotas muck-ups are not to do with the Tamil people. But anyway, that's besides the point. But right now, if you look at this budget, even, I mean, we are in a situation where we are debating the budget over an extensive period of time. But I mean, I raised some questions about the electricity board tariffs in parliament. The state minister is not even aware of how the electricity tariffs are being calculated. Maybe the cabinet minister would have been. So I think the people of this country need to, irrespective of race, class, region, all that, ethnicity, district, all that, should be aware. And in the next year, when there are elections, they should really try and elect people who can represent them in parliament better. That is what I mean. Youth or elderly, or I mean, yes, true. In a good, in an ideal situation, we should have more youth, less, more people of, more people with more better credentials who represent people. But I think right now at least people who represent their voters is what we need to really try and encourage people to look for in their future elections.
Thank you very much, Shanakyan. Much was discussed, however, time is of short supply. There are many questions that have come in, but unfortunately we have no time to pose them to you. But do stay tuned and send in your questions. Hopefully we'll get them in on a future show. Thank you very much once again, Shanakyan Rasamanickam, parliamentarian from the ITAC, also a part of the Tamil National Alliance, for joining us on our program tonight. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.